You are now live.
Wonderful. Hi, I'm Sarah from My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns, and I'm coming to you live today on Instagram and on YouTube. I'm going to be doing a sew-along, and this is the start of a series of sew-alongs which I'm going to share with you as I sew through our entire pattern range. So I'm really excited about this. I thought it was a really great thing to do at the beginning of the year, introduce you guys to some of our patterns if you haven't sewn them before, and also in the process get to make myself lots of lovely new clothes which I'm sure you guys will enjoy making along with me. So I've had quite a few plans for some new samples and new additions to my wardrobe for quite some time. And yeah, one of the things that I really wanted to add to my winter wardrobe is a dark based everyday amazing shift dress. Now I would normally go for something with sleeves at this time of the year, but I really like the soft fluted frill sleeve that's included in the everyday amazing dress. And yeah, it's a fantastic like feminine delicate finish to quite a simple dress. So yeah, that's the style that I'm going to go for. Now, bear with me just 1 second. I'm just going to grab a picture of the pattern so you can see what I'm talking about. Sorry, this is a bit of a work in progress, so I might just be kind of shuffling things around slightly, changing things up as I go. I hope you guys don't mind that. I hope you guys will just kind of bear with me and come along for the ride. So yeah, the pattern that we are looking at using today is the Everyday Amazing Shift Dress and Top. And it's basically this style that I'm going to be making. Now, I made this as a sample for the original photo shoot right at the beginning of developing this pattern. And I actually haven't really made for myself, made it for other people, but not for myself, this variation again since. So what I'm going to do today is make this variation. I'm going to make it in this beautiful polyester crepe fabric. So this is one of the panels that I've got cut out, so I'll just grab one layer, it's easier to show you. So it's got a really lovely subtle print on it, picking out lots and lots of colours that I already have in my winter wardrobe, like the raspberry pink and the ochre and a little bit of kind of tealy blue as well. I wear a lot of those colours, so I think I'm going to have like layering pieces that will go quite nicely with this, and I can really make it pop by wearing it with some brightly coloured tights as well. The actual fabric, like I said, it's a polyester crepe. The reason why I've decided not to go for a long sleeve with this is polyester crepe has no stretch to it at all. It's a very rigid fabric. And if I went for the long sleeve, I feel like it would be a little bit restrictive. I did actually make a variation just with the long sleeves without the frill. And I ended up cutting the sleeves off a bit short because they are quite tight fitting sleeves. They're quite snug by design, but it definitely works well in viscose. It works well in a crepe fabric that's got a little bit more stretch, but this fabric just doesn't have the stretch that you need really to get the movement in your arms. So yeah, that's why I've gone for the frill sleeve version. So what I've done already is I have had a look at, of course, the little instruction booklet inside. So every pattern comes with your A0 pattern sheets printed on nice thick paper, and you've got all your pattern instructions on the back. So you've got all your variations, you've got your body measurements and your finished garment measurements and your fabric requirements all clearly laid out there, and some suggested fabrics. So suggested fabrics for this are for beginners, cotton lawn, crepe, lightweight linen, non-stretch lace. And then for improvers, chiffon, silk, viscose, medium weight jersey, sequins. I have actually made a top in sequins lined with jersey in the top version of the fluted sleeve style, and I love it. It's gorgeous. I wore it again over Christmas. I think I made it 3 or 4 Christmases ago, and it comes out every single Christmas. But I really need to start mixing it in with like my everyday wear, because people should just wear more sequins all the time. And yeah, so those are the fabrics that you can use as well. And you also get a lovely little instruction booklet full of colour step-by-step photos and lots of information about how to get set up. So I have used the lay plan sheets to lay my pattern pieces out on my fabric and cut them out. And then I have transferred my markings. Now this is really important for this pattern. You need to transfer your notches for your darts, otherwise you're not going to know where to put them, and your markings for your dart end point. And you also need to transfer the little dot that's on the fluted sleeve to know where to match things up with on the armhole. So the little dot matches up with the dot on the main pattern pieces. So make sure that you have a good read through this page, page 10, and follow that to make sure that you're transferring all the markings that you need from your pattern piece onto your fabric. So once you've done that, we can start sewing and running through the step-by-step photos of every single stage of the process. So I haven't made one of these for a little while, so I'm going to keep the instructions out, and I'm going to point out any points that I think are really useful for you to know about as we go along. Okay, so first of all, we're going to overlock, or overcast if you've got a sewing machine rather than overlocker, all the long edges. So the sides, the curve, the centre back edges of the front and back panels, and the shoulder edges, and then the curved outside edges of the frill sleeve, and the long straight sleeve edges. Now I should have done this before I came on, but you're just going to have to watch me doing lots and lots of overlocking. What I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to basically do half of the garment and then finish off a little bit, and then come back to you for part 2 for the finishing touches, like adding the facings and how to finish the back. So yeah, today we're just going, we're going to go through finishing off the edges, starting to get that sleeve pinned into place, get those darts sewn, and then we'll come back to the next part. Sorry, we'll come back to the facings in part 2. So let's have a look at what we've got. We have back panel, another back panel, just here, and a big front panel. Now, as you can see, my fabric is quite dark, but it does have a lighter side. So I've marked with a little red cross that hopefully you can see there, where the dart end point is. And then around the armhole, this might be a bit more unusual to what you've seen. So you kind of have like a curve that goes out, comes to a point, and then you have another curve, and that second curve is your armhole point. So this bit here to here is where your dart is created. So I've just put some little red marks just here at the point end and just here where the notch is, to remind me that that is where my dart is going to go together. And then the whole of the dart just presses down to the armhole, just to show you, and then that creates that smooth armhole curve that you're used to seeing. It will become a lot more obvious once it has been sewn. So the first thing we're going to do like I said, is Overlock. So I'm going to overlock the front and back panels. Okey-dokey. Now I've set up my overlocker already with correct tensions and just double checking with the correct stitch length and width and no differential feed, because as we discussed, this fabric doesn't have any kind of stretch to it. So that should be absolutely fine. Of course, I've tested this out on scraps. And I'm just going to go ahead and overlock. A tiny bit puckered up, so I'm just going to loosen all of those stitches just ever so slightly. Okay, so I've got a reasonably flat bit of overlocking there. And that's one shoulder. I'm just going to do the side seams. Let's overlock those together. Sorry, together. I'm going to overlock them flat. I'm not overlocking anything together at this point. This is all just done on the flat woven fabric. And what I'm going to do is overlock everything, sew it together on the sewing machine, and then press the seams open. And I find that that creates the neatest finish. You can, of course, do French seams if you want to. They're a little bit more advanced and obviously double the amount of sewing, quite a lot of pressing as well. And this fabric presses okay, but it is quite delicate. So I want to avoid pressing it too much so that I don't end up burning it. So yeah, I'm going to go for the overlocking approach with this. Yeah, that's not looking too bad at all. Now, one thing I did find about this fabric, because it's very lightweight, it does kind of condense up. No matter what you do with the settings, it kind of condenses ever so slightly. But once you put the iron over the top of it, it loosens up, which is great. That's what we want, I think. So that's one side done. Go ahead and do the next side. And then the other shoulder. Now, it's actually great to be overlocking this before doing anything else, because this fabric really does fray a lot. And I'd just be working with a bag of scraps, I think, if I wasn't doing it with this method. So when you come back to me for part 2, you'd find that, yeah, it's just amongst a bunch of fray rather than anything that resembles a dress. Looking nice. And just a little pull just releases that overlocking, and that's all sitting nice and straight now, which is fab. I know that I'm going to need to give that just a little press to make sure that that definitely is as flat as I want it to be. And then I'm going up the other side edge. Those done, and I'm going to do my shoulder. Okay. So, like I said, I'm just going to do one side with you today, but I've overlocked the back seam edge, the back side seam edge, and the back shoulder seam. And then I have overlocked onto one side the front 2 side seams and 2 shoulder seams. You would obviously do the same for the other back panel. So you have 2 back panels, 1 front panel. Okie dokie. So the next thing that we want to do is to join the fabrics at the shoulder seams. So join the front and the back at the shoulder seams. So I'm just going to position this so it's nice and clear for you to hopefully be able to see. Sorry, Instagram guys, I can't see whether you can see, but I'm pretty sure I've angled the camera to make sure that you are able to take a look. I'm also live streaming to YouTube, so if you find that on Instagram it's not working for you, flip on over to YouTube and you'll find me on there, where I can see what I'm doing, so I can check. So I'm taking my back panel. So I've got my curved neck, back neck just here, my shoulder seam, and then my armhole. And I am placing my armhole to armhole. The right one. So armhole to armhole with right sides together, aligning the shoulder seams. Grabbing some pins. So out of practice of sewing with slinky fabric, because I've been doing a lot of sewing with like craft cottons for Christmas, and it feels quite alien to be holding these lovely lightweight fabrics again. It's nice though, I'm glad to be getting back into it. I think in the newsletter this week, Freya mentioned about some lovely viscose fabrics that we've got and some great ideas for it. Of course, this would work really, really well in your lightweight viscoses. And yeah, I think that would be fabulous. Right, so I've just got a few pins in there. I always put my pins in with the head sticking out and the pins facing in towards the fabric. The reason for this is I'm right-handed. It's easy for me to whip out the pins as I go, and I can sew all the way up to the pins before taking them out. And I just find it controls the fabric a lot better than me putting the pins along the direction of the stitching. So that's my reason, and I'm sticking with it. It's done me well so far. Okay. So I'm going to pop my overlocker down here because I don't need that anymore, just for now. And bring out this sewing machine. Okay. Now, if I pop it like this, I think you can see a little bit more of what we're working with. That's got a bit of space for my fabric. It's a really good idea when you're setting up your sewing machine to consider having lots of space to this side, so nothing's hanging off the table, so that you're definitely able to access your sewing machine really well and just have lots of room for the garment to move around, especially if you're working on something big like a coat or with heavyweight fabric or anything like that. Okay, so I've set up my machine with a Microtex needle because it's very lightweight, delicate fabric, and it's very tightly woven as well. So it needs a really sharp, precise needle to cut through the fabric. I'm going to stick with the default of 2.5 for the length of the stitch. And I've got my needle all the way over to the left so that I can use the markings on my needle plate for the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is what is used throughout this project. Okay, so let's sew. I'm going to sew my first seam, the shoulder seam, lining the fabric, pop my needle down, a couple of back stitches, just get everything secured, and then pop out that. I've done with my over here, my magnetic pin cushion. I love these, so good if you've got cats or kids. They're amazing. Or if you're just really clumsy like me. And then we're just going to stitch all the way along this seam, popping out those pins as we go. Oh, this really is so nice to sew with. And then at the end, just a few back stitches, just to secure everything, and then I can use the fabulous cutting button on this machine. We're actually getting some new machines in the studio tomorrow, ready for workshops. We've gone for Janome machines this time because we're renting them from Janome. And yeah, I can't wait to have some new toys to play with. So next week I might be stitching on a different machine. Do still love these. They are fantastic machines. We've just decided to change it up really because Janome offered a really good rental scheme. So yeah, can't wait to give those a try. So back to the project. Sewn my shoulder seam together. Just going to lift this up because I've got everything all a little bit caught up. There we go. That's it. Should be able to see what's going on now. Not a lead. There we go. So what we've got now is our front and back joined at the shoulder seam, and I'm going to open that out so that we can see the armhole. That is the bit that we're going to be dealing with next. And I'm actually going to flip it over so that the right side of the fabric is facing up, because then it will start hopefully to make a lot more sense. Right, so if I lay this out nice and flat, like so. so. Just bring that back. And we've got our back armhole, we've got our shoulder seam, we've got our front part, first part of the armhole, and then we've got this little kind of pointy out bit that goes into the other armhole, the front armhole. So this bit and this bit are going to be joining together eventually. But first of all, we're going to put in the flutter sleeve before we bring everything together. So the first thing that we need to do is to create the dart. Sorry, no. The first thing that we need to do is attach the flutter sleeve. Before doing that, we need to just overlock the edge of the flutter sleeve. So that's the next thing that we're going to do. So just pop those to one side. Ah, we meet again, Overlocker. Can't get enough of you, can I? We've spent all morning recording for our next, for our overlocking course. And yeah, me and this little lady are definitely becoming very well acquainted. And she's behaving very well as well. Well done. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to overlock around the curved edge of the fluted sleeve, which is looking a bit curly and curvy already. Now when I'm stitching, I'm keeping the edge of the fabric right on the little indentation on the needle plate. You'll probably find that your machine has a little indentation. You might not have noticed it before, but anything to the right of that will get cut off. And as I said, this fabric's very fray, so I want to make sure that I am actually trimming off just a tiny, tiny little slither as I go along. That is my edge, nice and overlocked. Yes, right, little lady, made her a right mess. I do actually have a little fabric basket just within arm's reach for all my trimmings as I go. I like to keep a tidy workspace as I go. So her down. No, we don't need you yet. You're a bit keen. So just going back to our joined front and back. The next thing that we're going to do, and I'd love to be able to do this the other way around so that I can kind of show you as we go. Next week, I might actually angle the camera down slightly so you can kind of see a little bit more over. Share any comments, suggestions that you think might be, you might find quite helpful, of angles that you might find helpful. We can improve on this together as we go. So I was saying previously, now that I have overlocked around the sleeve, I'm now going to finish off the edge of the sleeve before doing anything else. So I do need my sewing machine. So eager to get onto the dart that I keep trying to skip to that because it's a really fun. Sue, hi, hello. Thanks for your question. Yes, it is our own pattern. It's my handmade wardrobe pattern, and it's the Everyday Amazing Shift Dress that I'm making. I'm making the fluted sleeve version of the dress. And it's available as a printed pattern and a PDF from Crafty Sew&So. Okay, so to sew the narrow hem on the curved sleeve, I'm basically just turning the overlocking in. Now, if it was your first time of doing this, I would recommend just giving this a little press with the iron. I've done it a few times before and I'm familiar with how the fabric is going to behave, so I'm risking it. But yeah, this I would recommend just giving it a little press if you want to just add a little tiny bit more control to everything. Because it is a very, very narrow hem that we're sewing here. That's what makes it look so pretty. It's also something that I can't rush, so do bear with me. So as I'm sewing, I am just picking a point on my machine foot to line up with. Making sure that my edge is continually lined up with that. As I get around the curve, you can get to a point where it kind of just doesn't seem to want to fold the way that you want it to. Just stop sewing, leave the needle in the machine, lift up the presser foot, reposition, and you'll find that pretty soon on your way again. That's a pleasure, Sue. I hope it's one that you'll sew yourself, because it is a really, really versatile pattern. It's one that we recommend for beginners, but also people who have been sewing for a long time, if you want to try out a new. Yeah, I've made variations of this style of this pattern in chambray, cotton lawn. Freya's made viscose. Tracy, who does a lot of, she sews a lot of our patterns, and is one of our tutors. She's made it in scuba fabric, works well in that as well. Ponte Roma. Just basically anything that's a little bit stable. I don't think it would work so well in something like a single jersey. I just think it would be a little bit floppy. But Kim, another one of our tutors, has made it in French terry, the long sleeve version. She made it as more of a jumper, and that works really well. And this pattern has the option to finish it off with facings, so you can use self fabric facings or something contrasting, or you can bias bind the neckline. So there's the two options for finishing there. So like I said, it really is very, very versatile. And one of those ones that every time I look in my wardrobe, I think, why haven't I made more of these? But we're going to change that together. yeah, if you're not really a dress wearer, this, to be honest, I love the look of dresses, but I actually don't really own that many. The ones that I do, are mostly ready to wear. I really need to develop some styles for Love Sewing magazine, for dresses that I want to wear. I've actually got 3 projects lined up with them to do that. But yeah, top version is the one that I tend to make the most, and it's shorter at the front, longer. Great for tucking in if you want to just tuck the front bit in and then have the back out. That's quite a fashionable look at the moment. And yeah, I think, like I said, this pattern is very versatile because it's a dress and a top. So you can make it for summer. You can make it as a really simple shell top as well. And one of the key features about it is that it has darts coming from the armhole. So the darts come from the armhole down to the bust point. I just think that gives it kind of that nice European-y kind of feel. French darts are the ones that go from here down into, oh, sorry, no, the other way, from here up. So I think that always looks quite stylish. And I think darts placed in an unusual place, it just gives a garment a bit more of a unique style, really. So yes, that's what we've done on this one. So I've finished off the edges of the sleeve. You can see I've just taken a really, really narrow little hem. This will look much better after I've pressed it. I'm not going to go off and leave you and press it. I will do that after I've put everything together. Breaking my first rule of sewing, which is always sew with an iron set up near to you. Have to do that for the future. And yeah, now that I've finished off the outside edge of that, I can talk to you a bit about inserting the sleeve. So on the sleeve, in the inside, the bit that goes onto the armhole, we've got a little notch right in the centre. That's really important to be aware of. And then we've also got a little marking, which I've transferred with friction pen. So I don't know how clearly you can see that, but just about here, there is a little marking. That dot needs to line up with a certain point on the armhole. And I'll show you where that needs to line up. It's basically the pivot point at which your sleeve leaves the armhole and goes into the... Because one of the features of this pattern is, just showing you here, is that the fluted sleeve goes into the dart. You can just carry it round. You can have the fluted sleeve just going round into the armhole if you want, but it makes a really nice feature to have the fluted sleeve, the kind of the fluting kind of going into the dart. And again, just a little point of difference. It is more complicated, but with our instructions, you should be fine. So now I can start to insert the sleeve. So let's have a look. We've got the armhole, as discussed before, back, shoulder seam, front, dart just here, which will be made. And the sleeve, which I'm placing right sides together. Now that little notch that I was talking about that's in the centre of the circle, I'm going to line up with the shoulder seam. Again, if you're doing this, just press your shoulder seam open first. I'm going to finger press mine open and put a little pin in there. And then just for a little bit of extra security, because I haven't pressed anything, I always like to put an extra pin just to keep my seam allowances exactly where I want them to be, because these sneaky little seam allowances, they have a tendency to flip, and then you end up with all your seam allowance on one side. And we're going to be adding a facing to this as well, and you really don't want all your seam allowances all on one side. It's going to give you kind of a little lump where you really don't want it. Okay, so adding the sleeve to the back of the armhole is really easy. You just basically just pin it in place. And at the very end, it won't match up exactly. Well, actually it does. It matches up almost to a little kind of point at the end. And on our blog, we've got an article about pinning, which is well worth reading. Gives you tips about precision pinning. Not something that a lot of people think about, but actually the way that you put your pins in your fabric can massively be able to control the fabric whilst you're sewing it together or before you sew it together. Geeky, I don't care. I love a bit of precision pinning. So, oh, and when I refer to blog posts on here, even though this is the Crafty Sew&So YouTube channel, the blog posts that I'm referring to are on the My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns blog, which has an absolute wealth of tutorials and advice about fabrics and dressmaking. So yeah, definitely put that in your bookmarks, because it will be something that you'll be referring to time and time again, not just for sewing My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns. So I've pinned the sleeve onto the back armhole, right up to the shoulder, and I'm just going to continue doing that all the way round until I reach that little marking that we were talking about. And the notches, of course. Right. So I've pinned up to where the dot is, and just underneath that, if I flip the fabric back on the armhole, I can see I've got my little notch, my first front armhole notch. Now on the armhole there are 3 notches. There's one here, there's one on the little pointy bit, and then there's one just under the arm. And the one that's just under the arm, that's closest to the underarm, you really need to be careful not to use that as your dart notch. It is a bit complicated, but that is for if you're inserting the long sleeve. So don't use that one. That's not what you want to use for creating the dart. It's just notches that are either side of the little V shape, the little inverted V shape. That's going to be what you can create your dart with. Okay, so we've pinned everything on along the back and to the front up to where the dot is. Now we're going to do something a little terrifying, sorry, but you know, you're doing it with me, that's fine. And we're going to snip in to just almost up to that dot. Not quite to that dot, but almost up to it. So you can hopefully see, very slinky fabric to hold up to the camera. You can see I've just snipped that in and the dot's just there. Now I've got an extra light here, and I'm wondering if I might be able to literally shed a little more light on this, just so that you can really see exactly what we're talking about. It's one of those things where that's going to give too much light and reflection. Yes, not so good. Worth a try. But yeah, hopefully you can see that we've just snipped in almost up to that dot, but no further. Okay, so from that point, what we're going to do is, on your pattern, you will have noticed, hopefully, that there's a line that you need to draw onto the outside of your fabric. Now, I haven't drawn this on yet because I wanted to draw it on with you. I've just realised I'm going to need some pale ink to show up on this. So a carbon pencil, that was perfect. And the line basically goes straight through the middle of the dart. Sorry, from the notch all the way to the dart point. So I'm just going to find the dart point on the wrong side of where I've marked it, because you're going to need it on the wrong side of the fabric for actually creating the dart. And I've popped a pin through that. Now I'm going to mark that with my chalk marker. Okay. And now trying to move the fabric too much because it is a very, very slinky fabric. I'm going to use a little ruler to draw a line all the way along to the dart point from the notch that is closest. Okay, these carbon pencils are really great for dark fabrics. They definitely show up really well, but they do come off very, very easily. And you can get refills in different colours as well. It's a Primlove carbon pencil, which we sell through Crafty Sew&So. Right, yes, so I have drawn my line on there. And now I'm going to take the end of my sleeve. I'm going to actually trim the end off to a little point. So I'm trimming off my overlocking and I'm ending up with a really nice little point at the end there. And I'm just going to persuade that fabric to come along so that the edge just sits slightly over the line that I've created. Okay, I'm going to pin that in place. So just starting a little at a time, just bending that out the way. Now what is tricky here is making sure that the fold that you create doesn't kind of get in the way, doesn't get a big pucker in it. So you're just going to kind of use a pin to gently persuade that out the way. And when you're stitching that, you're going to need to kind of tickle it with your finger to get it to go where you want it to go. Okay. Again, just making sure that goes all the way along there. I'm actually just going to trim my point a little bit more so it's just trimmed off a little bit of the end, because I really don't want anything poking out the end of my dart. I've created it. The only thing I want you to see at the end of my dart is a nice, neat, flat dart end. Okay, so now I need to stitch very, very close to this edge of the sleeve, just to hold it down before stitching all the way around. So I'm going to just stitch along and then I'll hold it up and show you, and then I'm going to stitch all the way around, so to connect the sleeve onto the main body. A bit of a tidy while we're there. Okay. Sorry, Instagram, I hope I'm not blinding you there with the light. Okay. Now, just before I start stitching, I'm going to hold this up because I think it's fairly clear. I'm going to be stitching very, very close to the edge from this point here, all the way up to the dot here. Myself a little bit of a blunt pin there, a bit of a, try to get rid of them as much as possible. Sorry, guys. Just checking in with my colleague Emma, who is wonderful at kind of checking to make sure that all the tech's working. Yeah, and she's told me that Instagram is working well, so that's good. It's good to hear. Hurrah. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when you're doing things like this for the first time, but we really want to find all the ways that we can to connect with you guys, because since closing the shop, I think when we were out at craft fairs, we found a lot of people were saying to us, oh, I didn't know you were still going. And it's like, yeah, we're here. We're in our studio. We're definitely here for open days and for online shopping and for workshops. So, yeah, we definitely are here. But occasionally we have to pop up and go, hi, we're here in lots of different places. So hopefully lots of you will see us. We also do live online workshops regularly, as well as the in-studio ones. So have a look at those. Ooh. I've accidentally changed my stitch setting to a weird zigzaggy blind hem stitch. Don't want that. So I'm just starting stitching right from the very end of the sleeve. And like I said, I'm stitching really, really close to the edge. So the reason for that is that when I create the dart, I basically want everything to be dart as much as possible. And yeah, to achieve that, I need to not have any stitches showing, extra stitches. Okay. And then just stitching off the fabric so I can show you what I've done. So another reason that I chose this fabric is because it's got a contrast white, so hopefully you can see some of the stitching on there. So you can see I've stitched very, very close and just up to where we created that little pivot snip there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from about here, and I'm going to stitch my normal seam allowance. Actually, no, I'm going to stitch just slightly less than my normal seam allowance. So normal seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to go for 3/8, half an inch. 3/8. Weirdly, it is marked as 3/8 on my machine rather than half. But yeah, I'm going to sew half an inch all the way around, because then when I add my facings, I can sew my normal 5/8 of an inch, and it will catch everything in, and I won't have any extra stitches showing on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just stitching my 3/8 of an inch. I'm just double checking that I'm doing everything right. Yes, definitely. Yeah. It's always good, even when you've written the instructions, to check that you're actually following them. So because my fabric is really, really slinky, and I'm just getting up to where shoulder seam is, I'm taking extra care just to check all the layers. So when I'm sewing, I'm not just being aware of the top layer, I'm being aware of the bottom and of the seams that I'm connecting together, stitching down. So just making sure that everything stays nice and aligned and flat. We don't want any lumpy bits. And that will be particularly important when we come to put the facings on. Any lumps are going to make quite a difference at that point. Okay, move to the end. I'm just going to cut that off. And you can see got the sleeve attached in there, and the dart, the sleeve goes down into the dart. At this point, I can actually flip it back and you can start to see what is happening with that sleeve there. You can start to see ish that the sleeve has been inserted and it's got a nice flutiness to it. And then the dart is going to go, sorry, the sleeve is going to go into the dart. Now, creating the dart. So when you come to do this, because it is a bit fiddly, I would definitely recommend looking at your instructions quite carefully and marking things out the way that we've suggested. So we suggest using your chalk markers or your friction pens, your removable fabric markers to mark out the dart on your fabric before sewing it. And we always do that still. Even though we've sewn thousands of darts, we still mark them out because it's just something that it's just not worth guessing. You can guess, by all means, feel free. But then you're just gonna be kicking yourself when you're having to unpick. So yeah, the way that we suggest to do it is you find your notches, your 2 notches in your armhole that you need to bring together, and bring those together. So I'm just gonna bring those together and pop a little pin in at the end to make sure that they're aligned. And then you find your dart point. So I've got my dart point clearly marked just here. And then you lift up your fabric, holding onto the first pin and the dart point, give it a little shake. And flatten everything down as much as you can. Like I said, we have now got the sleeve involved. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of tickling, a little bit of persuasion to make sure that everything is caught within the dart and flat. Tend to get a bit kind of dictatorial over my layers of fabric at this point. You will sit flat. And that's one thing about fabric that you have to remember is that, you know, it is fabric, it's not paper, it's going to move, and you are the only one that can control it, but you can control it. Okay, so now that I've put pins all the way along at this point, I'm going to take my ruler and my pin and the pen. Oh, actually, I'm going to use my red marker because you'll be able to see that a bit better. Okay. So, normally, no, actually not normally, always I would mark on the other side of the fabric. I've marked on this side of the fabric, which is really silly because I know that I shouldn't mark on this side of the fabric. I should mark on the other side of the fabric. So whenever you're marking your darts, flip your fabric over so that you've got the bulk of the fabric on the left-hand side, and then mark your darts. And the great thing about this, with this, doing it this way, is that then you can also see the stitching line where you find your sleeve into your dart. So I can then make sure that the line that I draw is definitely enclosing those ends of the sleeve. So another good reason for putting the pins on the outside, it doesn't matter if you've put them in the wrong side, they're still going to be in the right place. Okay, so just holding that up to you, you can now see we've got the stitching line for where the sleeve is attached, and then we've got the red line underneath, just down there, and that's going to be my stitching line for my dart. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that. This will be the last thing that we do for this part of the sew along, and then you can join me again next week, same time, Thursday, when we'll be looking at how you'll put the facings in on the sleeves. And it's quite a clever little construction with the facings. Basically, you kind of bag everything out, so you end up with a really, really neat finish. Everything looks really clean and enclosed. Oh, by the way, just to say that if any of you, you usually watch us on Facebook, we've decided for these sew-alongs we're not going to be streaming to Facebook. We've had quite a few technical issues, and I think, unfortunately, it's kind of dented our confidence and hopefully not your confidence in our abilities to actually put forward a good tutorial. But you've got to work with the things that work for you. So we'll be streaming on YouTube, which seems to be working well. And we will also be on Instagram every Thursday at 1 o'clock. So put it in your diaries. I always think it's nice to have something to look forwards to, isn't it? A little bit kind of through the week, closer to the weekend. So I've just stitched all the way down, and I'm not back stitching at the end of my dart. I never back stitch at the end of my darts. Lift up my needle, pull the thread out, so you've got a decent amount. I'm just going to use the cutter on the end here to cut that off, and then I would knot that together. So I just take the two threads and knot those. So you can see here we've got our dart. On the other side it's got the stitching line, and if we turn this out, we've got, I'm hoping you'll be able to see this because it's really quite beautiful. But I don't know whether the black's going to show that well. Don't think it is. I'll have to put a photo up. And basically, yeah, the sleeve is really beautifully inserted into the dart, and the fluting just comes out from that, and it's really lovely, and I love it when it works so well. And it needs pressing, obviously. Make sure that you always press your dart. Use a tailor's ham if you've got one, that's really handy, or a rolled up towel or a couple of pairs of socks also has been used in the past, I will admit. So yeah, make sure that you always press your dart points nice and smooth and curved. Nobody wants pointy darts at their boobs, and the Madonna look is not in, it's not making a comeback. So yeah, that's how you insert your sleeve and create your dart. And next week we will be looking at how you add a beautiful facing to finish off the neckline and also enclose all your seams, so you don't have to do any more overlocking or anything like that. Of course, the alternative is to finish off the edges with bias binding, and then you would need to overlock the seam allowances. So we'll discuss that next week as well. So I hope you enjoyed joining me. If you do want to sew along with me next week, just get up to the point of having put your sleeves in and be ready to put your facings on your neckline, and you can sew along with me. You can buy the pattern, the Everyday Amazing Shift Dress by My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns, and you can buy it in PDF or paper format. And yeah, I hope that you will enjoy it. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. I've really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to come back next week and do more and carry on working all the way through all of our patterns and sharing them with you. Thanks so much for your feedback as well as we've been going along. Questions are wonderful, and yeah, I'll keep track of the questions and comments over the week, and we'll keep checking in with you so I can answer them all next week. Okay, it's been wonderful to join you. I hope you've enjoyed, and yeah, please do subscribe to our channel. We post lots of pre-recorded tutorials as well as the lives. And yeah, hopefully I will see you again at 1 o'clock next Thursday. Till then, happy sewing!